Was there any type of like mind tricks or like things that you would tell yourself, because there's so much coordination going on that it has to almost be muscle memory, right? At this point, like you can't really be thinking about playing everything.
I don't know. Sometimes people ask me that question, and there's not a trick to it. I do feel like if it's that sounded like a upsetting phone call. I feel like if you can dance, if you can keep rhythm with your feet, like playing a kick drum and a hi-hat is the next easiest thing to do, So
you kind of just added one on top of the other. It didn't start all at once, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's kick drum for sure, and then you kind of bring in the hi-hat, which makes sense, and it's I don't know. Once you get into a rhythm, pardon the pun, it comes out pretty easily.
Was there any sort of self-doubt you felt initially at just getting into the blues without the academic background, or even
well, I still have a lot of self-doubt in general, but no, I think a lot of it is like I didn't know what I was doing. It wasn't so much self-doubt as just like, I guess we'll give this a go, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't, and no harm. So not too much, just insecurity, I guess. More than anything else.
Do you feel like blues helps you work through those insecurities, since it's so emotional and there's so many things that tie into like finding the roots of yourself, almost like finding your own identity?
I don't know if it helps me work through my own insecurities as much as it is an outlet for me. It helps me work through or at least emote, I will say. I don't know if it solves any problems for me, but it
probably solves problems for other people listening to it. Gives them a escape for however long you're playing, and listen to someone else's problems.
Exactly.
Because that's what the blues is about, like telling people the shitty part of life, and
that's my
making
audience.
it into a story. Yeah,
people with problems.
Yeah, so they're like, all right, like I'm gonna go hear about someone else's problems tonight. So like my brother, my wife doesn't have to bitch at me tonight. Like I'll listen about someone else doing that. So when you were up in the Catskills, I know before you actually started recording, you played a show, and there were only about 4 or 5 people there, but this guy came up to you after the show.
Oh, yeah.
And he offered to
that was a crappy
fund
show.
your first studio album.
He did. He was extremely gracious.
And that's interesting to me. Like if I went up on stage and played, I feel like someone would come up to me and be like, I'll pay you not to play. I'll pay you not to play. But this guy was like, and I'm guessing you didn't have a huge personal relationship with this guy beforehand. Is it someone you met? Yeah.
I had met him, and it was one of those things. I was telling this story yesterday, actually. It's one of those, it sounds like a horrible cliche, and if it was written into a movie, I'd be like, well, that's just cheesy as all hell. How is it, shit doesn't happen like that. But I will say, I had just moved back to the city from Rosendale, New York, and it was a Wednesday night, and it was fall. It was like disgusting, rainy, cold, and like I was supposed to go up and play this show, this little cafe, and had a hard time motivating myself to get up there. Eventually, I ended up getting up there one way or the other. Place was empty except for one table, as you said. And, this fella approached me after the show. He's like, I really, really, really appreciate what you're doing, and I want to support you how I can. And we kept in touch, and he ended up helping me put out The Wildness, my first EP. So it was, and I guess you could say.
Were you it's hard to expect that, but what was going through your head when this guy approached you? I'm guessing it was after a show, and you're like in that kind of like downturn emotionally, like you just played, like you're kind of settling down, and this guy comes up to you and it's like, I want to fund your entire studio album.
Well, it wasn't, so, it was obviously a conversation that developed over a series of months. It wasn't, he didn't come out and say at that moment, like, he was like, here's a check, just tell me what you want.
Here's a blank check.
He was like, I want to support you, and just tell me what I can do to help you, type thing. And so we developed a relationship that way, and kept in contact, and he was extremely generous, and I owe pretty much all of what modest career I've made doing this is because of that one conversation I had in some weird way, so it's pretty unbelievable.
That's crazy how that connection happened, because if you never played that show at that night, then it's crazy how things come together like that. So I understand you're your third studio album, Ones to Keep Close,
yeah,
is a little less rushed. You felt like it was a little less rushed than the first two to come out. Just like the whole process behind recording. Maybe you felt rushed in the studio the first two because you said you didn't have as many days to record, and there's a lot of pre-production, things like that.
There's a lot of, obviously recording is an expensive proposition, and
yeah, of course.
My prior records were always on a not a deadline, but you had a budget, and so you get like, generally budgets are pretty modest, and you do the math. You're like, okay, I can afford 4 days in the studio, and 4 days, and they're long days. They're 13-hour days, and you just basically spend 4 days or 5 days in the studio, and whatever is done at the end of those 5 days, well, that's your record, whether you like it or not. And that's kind of my work up to this upcoming release, Ones to Keep Close, was I actually used the same producer that I used the EP I came out with.
And it was in Brooklyn.
It was in
too,
Brooklyn,
right?
yeah. We recorded over in East Williamsburg, and they were at a spot called Hyper Ballad, and they're good friends of mine and amazingly generous with their time, and they do a lot of commercial work out of their studios, and so I was able to go in on the weekends and late nights and stuff like that, and kind of use the studio at my discretion, which was good and bad, just because you can't. It's very tough to book musicians late at night sometimes, but there was no rush, there was no ticking clock, which is good and bad because sometimes things can drag on. Like sometimes it's good to have that deadline because you want the yes.
She's picking up some speed.
Yeah, I love that. I like them. She's like, oh no, oh no. Not having that ticking clock can be good and bad, I guess. It's nice to have a deadline sometimes.
What is the recording process like? Because you're playing everything at once live. Are you trying to do that, or even at first when you started in the studio, are you recording things separately? Did you start to try to do it live?
Something is always the biggest debate with me going into the studio. This particular record, I kind of went in with the idea of saying, you know what, I'm separating the two. My live show is one thing, and I want this record to be a studio record. I want it to be about what I can do and not be handicapped about what's happening live. So I probably, it's my most, people say it all the time, but it's my most ambitious record to date, I guess. I was able to play with a lot of amazing musicians. Great guys came on, and far better than me. And, we had a great sound engineer, and Rob, my buddy, produced it. And we kind of just made it about the songs in the studio at that moment. I didn't worry too much about how I was going to do it, translate it live,
So at first, it might have been kind of like almost a chip on your shoulder. Like, I want this to sound live in the studio, and over time, maybe you started to think differently. Like, if I'm in the studio, I might as well use all the resources.
Exactly. Between like Spirit's Furnace and Ones to Keep Close, for sure, I had that kind of realization, I think, because I kept getting hung up on my ego and what like, well, I can't do this live, and what does that mean for people who actually listen to my music? And but I think it forces me to grow, which is great, which I wanted to do. And I'm even, because of what was happening in the studio, I'm now like the first 3 shows of my record release coming up here, New York, LA, and San Francisco. I got a backing band for the first time, and so it'll be my first time trying to do what I've done on my records in the studio live, which was...
What is that adjustment going to be like on stage for you? Because you're so used to doing everything yourself. Are you going to like kick them off stage and be like, actually, no, guys, I got this?
I'm absolutely terrified. I'm not going to lie. I have no idea what's going to happen. It could be just disastrous, and people are going to want their money back and all that other good stuff. Or who knows? Maybe it will be the start of something that will hopefully be a regular. And it's another element of my live show that I can bring out when I can.
Yeah. Well, like you were saying, being uncomfortable in the studio is definitely a place of growth.
Yes.
So if you're taking that to the stage, I'm guessing there are going to be parts that you miss about playing by yourself, but there are also going to be parts where you're like, oh shit, like, I kind of like this. Like, I like having people behind me and you know, if people want their money back, they have to yell at 4 people instead of one.
Yeah, no, exactly.
But which they won't. But it's a whole different dynamic.
It is. It's a total different dynamic. And, you know, I haven't played with a band since that punk rock band, you know, when I was 17 years old. So
That's crazy.
It's a funny thing.